Before the Aztecs, before the Maya, there was a civilization so advanced that historians still can't explain how they did it. They carved 40-ton stone heads without metal tools, built cities in the jungle, and then vanished without a trace. This is the story of the Olmecs, and what you're about to hear will change everything you thought you knew about ancient America. When most people think about ancient civilizations in the Americas, they think about the Aztecs or the Maya. But here's what they don't teach you in school. There was a civilization that came before all of them, a civilization that was building massive pyramids and creating art so detailed it looks like it could have been made yesterday. They're called the Olmecs, and for some reason they've been left out of most history books. Today we're going to dive into who they really were, what they built, and why their sudden disappearance is one of the biggest mysteries in archaeology. Here's the problem. We know almost nothing about the Olmecs compared to other ancient civilizations. They didn't leave behind written records like the Egyptians did. They didn't have massive stone cities like the Romans. What they did leave behind were these giant stone heads, intricate jade carvings, and ruins buried deep in the jungles of Mexico. And here's where it gets weird. Some of these stone heads have features that look completely different from the native people of the area. We're talking about African-looking faces carved thousands of years before any documented contact between Africa and the Americas. So who were these people? Where did they come from? And why did they disappear? Archaeologists have been scratching their heads over this for decades. The Olmecs are considered the mother culture of Mesoamerica, meaning every civilization that came after them, including the Maya and the Aztecs, borrowed ideas from them. But if they were so important, why do we know so little? Let's start from the beginning. The Olmec civilization emerged around 1500 BCE in what is now southern Mexico, specifically in the tropical lowlands of the modern-day states of Veracruz and Tabasco. This area is hot, humid, and covered in thick jungle. Not exactly the kind of place you'd expect a major civilization to pop up. But the Olmecs didn't just survive here, they thrived. They built their cities along rivers, which gave them access to fresh water and made it easier to transport goods. The most famous Olmec sites are San Lorenzo, La Venta, and Tres Zapotes. These weren't small villages. These were full-blown urban centers with pyramids, plazas, and thousands of people living and working together. San Lorenzo is believed to be the oldest. It was at its peak around 1200 BCE, which means it's older than most of the famous structures you've heard of. We're talking older than the Parthenon in Greece, older than the Great Wall of China, and yet, most people have never even heard of it. At San Lorenzo, archaeologists found something that blew their minds. Buried in the ground were these massive stone heads. And I'm not talking about little sculptures. These things weigh between 20 and 40 tons each. That's about the same weight as 6 elephants, and they were carved from a single piece of basalt rock. Now here's the thing. The nearest source of basalt is about 50 miles away, so somehow the Olmecs managed to move these gigantic rocks through dense jungle, across rivers, and then carve them into perfect human faces, all without wheels, all without metal tools. Let that sink in for a second. They didn't have iron, they didn't have bronze. They used stone tools to carve stone. That's like trying to cut a diamond with another diamond. It's technically possible, but it takes an insane amount of skill and patience. So why did they make these heads? That's the million-dollar question. Each head is unique. They all have different facial features, different expressions, and different headgear. Most experts believe these heads represent Olmec rulers or important leaders. It's like their version of a presidential portrait, except way more impressive. But here's where it gets controversial. Some of these heads have broad noses, full lips, and other features that some people say look African. This has led to wild theories about ancient contact between Africa and the Americas. Now, there's no solid evidence to support this, and most scholars think the heads just represent the natural diversity of people living in the region. But it's still one of those mysteries that keeps people talking. Let's talk about La Venta. This site became the Olmec capital after San Lorenzo declined around 900 BCE. La Venta is where things got even more advanced. The Olmecs built a massive pyramid here, one of the earliest in all of Mesoamerica. It's about 100 feet tall and shaped like a volcano. Some researchers think this design was intentional, meant to honor the mountains and volcanoes that were sacred to the Olmecs. Inside La Venta, archaeologists found elaborate tombs filled with jade, obsidian, and other precious materials. Jade was extremely valuable to the Olmecs. They didn't use gold or silver like later civilizations did. For them, jade was the ultimate symbol of power and wealth. They carved it into axes, masks, and figurines. Some of these jade carvings are so detailed that you can see individual fingers and facial features. And remember, they're doing this with stone tools. But the Olmecs weren't just artists and builders. They were also astronomers and mathematicians. They created one of the first writing systems in the Americas. We've found carvings that look like early hieroglyphs, but we still can't fully read them. They also developed a calendar system that later civilizations, including the Maya, would adopt and refine. The famous Mesoamerican long count calendar, the one that caused all that 2012 doomsday panic, has its roots in Olmec astronomy. They also played a ball game that would become a huge part of Mesoamerican culture. This wasn't just a game for fun. It had deep religious and political meaning. The game was played with a heavy rubber ball, and players had to hit it through stone hoops using only their hips, elbows, and knees. In some versions of the game, the losing team would be sacrificed to the gods. Yeah, the stakes were pretty high. Now let's talk about their religion. The Olmecs worshipped a variety of gods, many of which were connected to nature. One of their most important deities was the were-jaguar, a half-human, half-jaguar creature. Jaguars were seen as powerful, mystical animals, and the Olmecs believed their rulers could transform into jaguars. You see this imagery all over their art. Jaguar motifs, fangs, claws, they're everywhere. They also believed in a complex underworld and practiced elaborate burial rituals. When an important person died, they would be buried with offerings, jade masks, and sometimes even human sacrifices. This shows that they had a strong belief in an afterlife, and that social hierarchy was a big deal in their society. The Olmecs also had a trade network that stretched across Mesoamerica. They traded jade, obsidian, cacao, and other goods with distant regions. This means they were in contact with other cultures, and their influence spread far beyond their own cities. You can see Olmec-style art and iconography in places hundreds of miles away from their heartland. This is why they're called the mother culture. They set the stage for everything that came after. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. Around 400 BCE, the Olmec civilization started to collapse. Their great cities were abandoned. The massive stone heads were buried. The pyramids were left to be swallowed by the jungle. And here's the part that keeps archaeologists up at night. We don't know why. There are theories, of course. Some think it was environmental collapse. The Olmecs were farming the same land for centuries, and it's possible they exhausted the soil. Deforestation could have led to erosion, flooding, and a breakdown of their agricultural system. Without food, people would have been forced to leave. Others think it was warfare. There's evidence of violence at some Olmec sites. Stone monuments were intentionally destroyed, which suggests conflict, either internal or with outside groups. Maybe rival cities turned on each other. Maybe a new power rose up and conquered them. There's also the possibility of disease. A plague or epidemic could have wiped out large portions of the population. We've seen this happen to other civilizations throughout history. But here's the thing. None of these theories fully explain what happened. The collapse wasn't sudden. It happened over a couple of hundred years. And it wasn't total. The Olmec people didn't just vanish into thin air. Their descendants likely merged with other cultures and became part of the civilizations that followed. The Maya, the Zapotecs, the people of Teotihuacan, they all carried pieces of Olmec culture with them. But the Olmec civilization as a distinct entity was gone. Their cities crumbled. Their religion faded. And for over 1,000 years, their achievements were forgotten. It wasn't until the 1800s that archaeologists started rediscovering Olmec sites. And even then, it took decades for people to realize just how important they were. The first colossal head wasn't found until 1862, and for a long time, people thought it was left behind by some other civilization. It wasn't until the 20th century that researchers pieced together the full story. Today, the Olmecs are finally getting the recognition they deserve. We now understand that they were the foundation of Mesoamerican civilization. They invented the calendar, the writing system, the ball game, and the architectural styles that would define the region for thousands of years. Without the Olmecs, there would be no Maya pyramids, no Aztec temples, no rich cultural heritage in Mexico and Central America. So, let's recap. The Olmecs were the first major civilization in the Americas. They built cities in the jungle, carved 40-ton stone heads with nothing but stone tools, and developed advanced systems of writing, astronomy, and mathematics. They influenced every civilization that came after them, and yet they remain one of history's greatest mysteries. We still don't know exactly who they were, where they came from, or why they disappeared. And that's what makes them so fascinating. The next time someone tells you the Aztecs or the Maya were the first great civilizations in the Americas, you can correct them. The Olmecs were here first. They laid the foundation for everything that followed. And even though their cities are gone and their language is lost, their legacy lives on in the art, architecture, and culture of modern Mexico. The Olmecs prove that advanced civilizations can rise in the most unexpected places. They didn't need the Nile River or the Fertile Crescent. They built their empire in the jungle, and they did it thousands of years ago. That alone deserves respect. If you want to see more videos about lost civilizations and the mysteries they left behind, hit that subscribe button.